So good evening. I'm Melanie, and I'm introducing Rachel for tonight. She is perhaps best known for her incredibly touching book, The Listener. It was a finalist for the 2016 CLMP Firecracker Award and won the William Van Wert Prize for novel excerpts. Rachel is thoughtful in both her reading and writing, and she crafts stories with compelling characters that remind us and teach us a little more about what it means to be human. I had the pleasure of working with her this past semester, and she's a fantastic writer, mentor, and friend. And tonight she will be reading an essay, and it is called The Price of Admission. Rachel.
Okay, I know. I had moved this podium back to be near the water, but I know I can't.
We can move it.
The microphone thing.
Yeah,
move
we
the
can
table.
move it. Oh, all right. Here, let's move the table.
Okay. Thanks. Like
too
a
close?
lot of other, no, that's fine. Like a lot of other people, I've got that thing going on. So bear with me. I do usually write fiction. I don't write a lot of essays, but I wrote this one in the last 12 days because I felt like I had to, not because I had a lot of time, mind you, but I felt I needed to respond to something that was happening. So since I wrote it very recently, it's rough. It's rough. It's really not done. So I'll tell you that now. There's three parts to it. There's three kind of like dateline headings. So, The Price of Admission, June 1972. It is the first day of summer vacation. I am 13. Liz has already turned 14. After months of lobbying for the privilege, our parents have finally consented to let us go into New York City by ourselves. Anyone with half a brain could have predicted my parents would be the problem here. Liz's parents, though, tend to go with the flow. Liz's father is a psychologist, and her mother has an advanced degree in comparative literature. Or, as my father likes to say, Liz's dad is a psychologist, and her mother is a professional patient. At any rate, we have no idea why they've all made such a big deal about this. The train station, which you can see from Liz's house, is at the center of our town. Almost everyone's father, including both of ours, rides the commuter train each weekday for the 35 minutes it takes to reach Grand Central. Just long enough to read the New York Times, my father says. On the morning of our trip, my mother drives me to Liz's house so that she and I can walk to the station free and independent from parental intrusion. On the way to Liz's house, my mother makes me repeat our pre-approved itinerary, one we have vowed we'll adhere to religiously. I tell her that when we get out of the station, we will walk 2 blocks east to Fifth Avenue. Then we will walk north to 59th Street and back down Madison to Grand Central. Under no circumstances are we to enter Central Park. Remember, it's 1972. I tell my mother that we're going to window shop. We each have money for our train tickets, a hot dog, and a soda, and not much else. The territory between Grand Central Station and 59th Street is filled with department stores. It costs nothing to roam the floors of these places. Look at the safari gear in Abercrombie & Fitch on 45th Street. Try on hats in Saks Fifth Avenue. Spritz ourselves with perfume in Bonwit Tellers. What we don't tell the parents is that the trip is the fulfillment of a promise to ourselves. A promise made and remade these last few months during the unbearable sewing unit in home ec. In 7th grade, you only have to be able to sew an apron in order to pass, but by the end of 8th grade, you have to sew a dress that you can actually wear out in the world. On the sage advice of our teacher, I chose the simplest possible pattern, a sleeveless shift. But as a way to express my real self, I selected a mod purple and white fabric with geometric design. Liz, who is in every way more mature and worldly than I, sewed a paper dress, a choice that Mrs. V allowed, but that works far better as a conversation piece than as an article of clothing. But then, conversation is what interests us. We are girls sprung from ideas of who we wish ourselves to be, notions we spin and craft, scrap and refashion during hours and hours of conversation. All year long, we have been reprimanded for talking when we are not supposed to be. At home, our parents pick up the phone in the kitchen and tell us to say goodnight. At school, we are sent out into the hallway and sometimes all the way down to the office. We have been cautioned to control ourselves, contain ourselves. Every time we round a corner, someone is shushing us. Today is our first day of freedom. And not only will we talk until we're hoarse, we're going to walk these dreamed up versions of ourselves onto the real live streets of the greatest city in the world. When I sit down on the straw-colored wicker seat, just as the train starts to move, I think I might bust with a sense of fullness. The day is beastly hot. Every chance we get, we duck inside somewhere in an attempt to escape the sun. Brentanos, Scribner's, St. Patrick's. We glance at where the tree will be in December in Rockefeller Center, and we go into Bergdorf's and ride the escalator. We walk all around the lobby of the plaza, stare at the people having tea in the Palm Court, including some girls about our age who seem to be with their grandmother. We pity those girls, lorded over by that old lady. And we tell each other that very soon, in our certain futures, we will book rooms in this hotel as often as we like. Then we cross the street to F.A.R. Schwartz and touch all the stuffed animals. While we're looking at the doll houses, Liz grabs my wrist so she can read my watch, and we realize we'd better get going. We have promised to be on the 434. Liz leads us over to Lexington. I know she wants to go to Bloomingdale's, but when we get to 59th and Lex, I tell her that if we're not on that 434 as promised, they'll kill us. So we turn south on Lex, walking on the shady side of the street. I have worn the wrong shoes, new white sandals, and I can feel my heels being rubbed raw, the left more than the right for some reason. Liz still has $1 and she wants to buy some gum and maybe a copy of Tiger Beat for the ride home. She stops at a newsstand and begins poring over the gum and candy selections. For someone who is so opinionated, she often has a hard time making up her mind. She holds up one pack of gum after another, asking the price. I'm paused at the edge of the newsstand, slightly annoyed, because now we will have to run for the train, and I'm pretty sure my left heel is already bleeding. The street is crowded, and I move to the side of the newsstand, out of the way of what suddenly seems like a lot of people all rushing past. A man, a businessman, wearing a jacket and tie, asks me if I have the time. The sun's glare makes it difficult for me to read my watch, and the man motions for me to move further from the street to where it is darker by the side of the building. I take about 3 steps in his direction, and I'm now in the shade. I'm able to see the time on my watch face. Before I speak, I worry the way I always do when someone asks me any question having to do with numbers. My watch has Roman numerals, and it's hard to be exact. I don't want to say the wrong time. Come on, Liz says. She's done with her purchase and has walked up beside me. I think it's 4:20, I say to the man. You think? The man says. I look up at him. He grins and throws open his suit jacket, and for a split second I'm certain he's going to pull out a knife. But then I see. His pants are unzipped, and he's grabbing his penis, waving it at us. It's bright daylight, and there are hundreds of people all around us, and in the course of a second or two, during which I am frozen, my sense of peril rewrites itself to now include sunshine and sidewalks and newsstands. Liz grabs my wrist and with all her bony strength yanks me into motion. We run. We push past people. We do not stop for red lights, and we do not turn around for fear that if we do, we'll have to see him again. I'd always thought that if something bad happened in the city, I would just shout, "Help! Police!" and help would come. But we do not yell for help. This is a kind of danger outside the realm of help, and that scares me more than anything. We run and run until we are in Grand Central Station, where we pause only to look up at the departure board for the number of our track, and then we run onto the train, sliding into seats across from one another. I am only slightly relieved when the doors close and the train starts moving through the long, dark tunnel. I think my parents were right not to want me to go to New York. They were right to think I would mess up somehow. We were not supposed to walk down Lexington, and every 4-year-old knows you don't talk to strangers. Why had I been so stupid? When the conductor comes to collect our tickets, I feel him look at me like he knows, like it's written on me what just happened. I pull on a loose thread at the bottom of my dress, and half the hem comes down. I'd never replaced my basting stitch with a straight stitch, even though Mrs. V had told me plenty of times. I can't believe that when I put this dress on in the morning, I thought it looked good, that I looked good. Liz has sweated through her paper dress in spots. And when she gets home, she will throw it away. We look out the window. She holds out her pack of gum in my direction. We don't talk about what happened or about anything else either. Finally, we are as silent as everyone's been telling us to be all this past year. When we get home, we will not tell our parents. And though we remain friends for a few more years, we will never mention this to each other.
Wow.
In fact, I will never talk about this until it happens again when I am in college, walking home one night from the library. For all the talking Liz and I have done, we do not have the words for this. October 2017. I pull into a parking spot at the West Farms Mall and check my watch. I have just enough time to race inside, pay for the dress I set aside last week, race out, and make it to the night class I teach in Middletown. Of course, I don't have to buy the dress. I could wear something old. But if I don't want to wear something old, and I really don't, then I have to get the dress today because I'm leaving for Ryan's wedding tomorrow. I've known Ryan since he was 6, when he and my son played soccer together. His parents are 2 of my closest friends, and the prospect of attending this wedding in New Hampshire fills me with a rare, unmitigated sense of joy. Before I get out of the car, I reach for the legal pad I keep on the passenger seat. I jot down proximity, translucent time, stacked, boy and man, father and son, one on top of another. In 90 minutes, when I'm in front of my class and I've just read Stanley Kunitz's poem, Halley's Comet, aloud, there's a chance I may still be able to recall what these notes mean to me in this moment. God, I love this poem. Look for me, Father, on the roof of the red brick building at the foot of Green Street. That's where we live, you know, on the top floor. I'm the boy in the white flannel gown, sprawled on this coarse gravel bed, searching the starry sky, waiting for the world to end. It'll sink me if they don't love this poem too. As I rifle through my glove box for my 20% off coupon, a car pulls into the space to my left, perfectly blocking the sun and casting a shadow across my dashboard. I caution myself against doing the thing I always do, the thing my ex-husband loathed, which is swing open my car door too forcefully. Lots of people, it turns out, are strangely invested in keeping their car doors blemish-free. Maybe I shouldn't do the Kunitz poem today. The students in this class have been alarmingly non-responsive all semester. It might be the worst class I've ever taught, which is sad after teaching for over 30 years. It may be the group dynamics of the class, or it may be me. Perhaps I've topped out, tipped over the edge, and am on the downslide. It's possible. If I bring Halley's Comet, this poem that's a breathing, palpable, incantatory presence into the classroom, and they don't respond, that's what happened with the Anne Carson poem. I get out of my car. The man in the car next to me slides over to the passenger seat and palms a piece of ripped notebook paper against the window. Before I can read the message, I think he must be in trouble, trapped, taken against his will. For a split second, I wonder about human trafficking. And then I read the block print letters. You are beautiful. And below it, a phone number. I turn away as if I've been smacked, and he tears out of the parking lot. I don't look back as the car takes off. I don't attempt to get his license plate. What would be the point? I enter Macy's through the furniture department, and I sit for a moment on one of the couches in a living room display. I berate myself for my pounding heart. There is no threat. Cut it out. Quit behaving like you're in danger. There is no danger. While I attempt to reassemble myself, the self I was 4 minutes ago, the pretend living room is the perfect room for me. Neither of us has any reliable context. There are silk flowers in a vase on the coffee table and books painted along one wall to make you feel as if you're in the library of an English country home. Everything I do next is robotic. That purchase I was so happy about only 10 minutes before now takes place without me there. As I drive to my class, I try to figure out why the hell I'm reacting as if some crime has been committed. Nothing happened. Still, there was a theft. What was taken? Me. I had been the person sitting in a car thinking about a Stanley Kunitz poem, thinking how it was that he could make grief feel like love, up until someone wheeled into a parking lot with a sign telling me what I really was. November 2017. Jim and I arrived at the bar before Gary. I don't really want to be here. Gary is Jim's childhood friend, a nice enough fellow, very smart, a bit wooden, can't look you in the eye, ever. Jim's pretty certain he's on the spectrum, and now that one of Gary's nephews has been diagnosed, Gary has said as much himself. It is a few days before Thanksgiving, and I'm in serious danger of having to pull a domestic all-nighter in order to cook and clean for the crowd coming to my house. What I need is a night in, not a night out. Jim and I order some food and some wine. On one of the TVs above the bar, we see Charlie Rose's face. Another one bites the dust, Jim says. Wow, I say. I love that show. Loved that show, he corrects me. When I get home later that night, there will be a phone message from my 86-year-old aunt telling me she is bereft. That's my night, she will say, her high-pitched voice and careful elocution a reminder of another century. Charlie Rose was my steady date each night. I feel I've lost a friend. When I call her back, I will not mention that these last 2 months have been thrilling for me. I long ago gave up protesting the ubiquitous. I simply figured it was the price of admission for being female in this culture. And now, quite suddenly, it's as if folks started saying, hey, look at the wallpaper. This wallpaper's really messed up. Gary arrives, and we chit and we chat. Monday night football is on, and occasionally we all glance up at the screen. Jim reaches over and eats the rest of my calamari. Gary shakes his head, and I follow his gaze up toward one of the TVs. It's Charlie Rose again. I've had enough of this already, he says. Point made, you know? You've had enough of this, I shout, lunging in his direction. The bar is nearly empty, and my voice is too loud. The bartender and the waitstaff loitering around the service bar look in my direction. Gary flushes. He says a lot of things I only half hear. Overcorrection, tarred with the same brush, accusations, allegations. Then he stands up and excuses himself and heads to the restroom. When he's gone, I turn to Jim and apologize. You have nothing to be sorry for, he says. I think I hurt him, I say. You just caught him off guard. I nod. It's Otto all over again. I must have been 10 or 11. It was a Saturday in late winter, and I was waiting in line with my mother at the German deli. My mother was not yet a famous feminist historian, but she was already in graduate school, and she'd convened a consciousness-raising group in our town. The line at the deli was long, and when our turn finally came, Otto, one of the two brothers who owned the deli, leaned his immense pink face over the elevated meat counter and said to my mother, "What can I get for you today, honey?" My mother wheeled around, and with her razor-sharp articulation and ear-splitting projection, she was born to lecture in those amphitheater-like classrooms, said, "Don't you ever call me honey." The place was packed, and instantly everyone quieted. I was still at an age when I thought my mother was always right. But Otto was not a young man, and he spoke with an accent, and he always thought to toss some Hershey's Kisses into the bag with our meat order. Otto looked as if he'd been slapped. He was visibly hurt and clearly bewildered. My mother had done nothing to raise his consciousness. She'd merely pulled the rug of his reality out from beneath him. Violence begins at the cellular level, conceived in thought, then language. The problem of my mother and Otto has never left me, and I had promised myself that I would never express my feminism at the expense of someone else's humanity. It's a long time before Gary returns from the restroom. When he does, it looks as if he's washed his face, and I wonder if a therapist has taught him this trick of removing himself from a tense situation, and that makes me feel even worse. I raised my own children to believe that if you want to change the world, you must be willing to teach. And I have failed miserably now to teach Gary anything. I silently try on a few apologies. "I didn't mean to come on so strong," or "Sorry, but this stuff's actually a big deal for me," or "It wasn't my intention to..." But I cannot get myself to say any of these things. I don't want him to feel bad, but I do want him to know how bad I feel. And I cannot, just now, begin to hand-pick the words that, when ordered correctly, explain what it's like to repeatedly and systemically have one's multi-dimensionality collapsed into a dirty line drawing. I do not move through this world thinking I'm a woman on the in-breath and I can be fucked on the out-breath. Not until someone is there to remind me. Gary leans on the bar and takes a sip of his beer. Then he looks over in my direction. "I'm sure there are things I don't fully understand," he says. Thanks.
Do we have time for questions, comments?
I didn't want it to.
Okay.
We're all just like speechless.
Jeff.
You mentioned that this was rough.
Yeah.
It was rough. Are you satisfied with, your structure of the story, or is it like?
Well, I've never done that. It started off, I was just writing about that childhood thing. And then, I've been, I'm not sure. There might be I might add other pieces to it. I don't know. I don't know. I haven't really, especially for me, creative nonfiction, I need to let it sit, and I often don't even know what I'm writing until, some time's gone by. So I'm not sure, really. Yeah.
Was there? You mentioned that this was you felt like you needed to respond to something that was
Yeah.
happening. I'm curious if was there there had been obviously a series of these stories that have come out. Was there one identifiable moment at which you thought to yourself, I have something that I want to say about this?
No, it was more that I kept going around saying, "Wow, this is wild. This is people are saying the wallpaper." That wallpaper line I've been saying to myself, all of a sudden everyone's yeah, this has always been happening. Well, what the hell? Why is this? And I found it I almost wanted to laugh every day, everybody just woke up. I mean, and now it's okay to so there wasn't any one moment. It was more that, but also then what happened is I was not satisfied with some of the things I was reading in terms of what I knew was going to happen right away. When I knew that there was going to be a backlash. And so that's the thing in everything that I've read, I don't feel like and this was the thing I was trying to do, to get at that, just the experience of what it's like to be a girl in this culture. That's all, just on a really kind of granular level. I didn't need to tell some big dramatic story, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to explain what the wallpaper feels like.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. So I was trying to do that, in that, yeah.
So listening to the structure, I was so curious that the first episode is one in which you're sort of rendered silent, and then the final episode is one in which you feel you were maybe too express. I was wondering, was that intentional? Does that
No.
evolve from, arise from the material, because it has a very nice structure to it?
No, I was just writing about things that actually happened.
Mhm.
And that thing in the mall, which was just a weird thing, that happened though, right, like, I just had that conversation with you in Maine.
Oh, really?
We were
Oh
yeah.
my God, and that was that same
Yeah,
day?
it happened like 2 days
Oh my
later.
God.
And we were just talking about all this stuff, and I'm like, wow. Like, so I just had to include, and also I was surprised as an older person that I was, like, that caught my attention or bothered, like, it bothered me, then it bothered me that I told myself not to be bothered about it. Like, all that's part of the thing, you know?
Right.
That's part of the thing. I live in this culture too. Wasn't raised on another planet, and I'm going,
Right.
oh wow, that's really bad. You guys have sexism there, you know? I mean, I'm a product of the culture that I,
The
yeah.
title of the book, title of the essays.
Um, Yeah, Eleanor.
Not really a question, but just a comment. I think it's interesting that you took this approach. I mean, it's kind of what we've been talking about in terms of the community and being inspired with other ideas and perspectives. Because I've been watching how many times, #MeToo have appeared. My husband and I were talking about it, and I was like, I think we could all layer on a #MeToo, but this is a unique take on something that you
And I
clearly articulates pervasive in our culture.
Yeah.
So kudos to you
Thanks.
for going at it at a different angle.
And that hashtag thing, I don't like hashtag anything,
It's
so that was
just-
bugging me too.
Yeah, it becomes part of the wallpaper. So
Yeah.
I like that, the way that you articulate
Yeah.
that you're actually going at it in a different way. Really helpful, because I think there are a lot of stories that probably point to the larger issue.
Yeah.
I think we were talking about it earlier, and actually, Susan and I were talking about it at dinner. It's just one of these things where it's like, there's a lot more there that needs to be said.
Mm.
So,
Thanks.
thanks for starting to say it.
Thanks, Ellen.
Did you feel empowered by writing it just for yourself? And maybe that's too strong a word, but it seems to be
Yeah,
where
you
a
know
lot
what?
of women
Partly
want to sit
because
right now.
there was that childhood story that I never,
Right.
I started like really remembering all those details about it, and then I started, and then it made me sad. You know, it made me sad, and then because my daughter was home at the holidays, and I trust her editorial opinion, and I needed someone else to listen to this before I read it out loud, so I read it to her, and then of course that made it, then we got in a pretty big conversation about it. So, yeah.
So you really kept your promise to your friend, I mean, that you never ever
Oh, we
talked
didn't
about
promise not to. We just did. We were
it.
like,
Yeah.
yeah.
All the way till now.
Oh, we just never mentioned. It was like,
Wow.
it was like we'd done something bad, and,
Right.
which is, it's pretty textbook stuff.
Yeah.
Michael.
We've been talking about this in the fiction writing workshop, the novel writing, and we've been arguing, not arguing, but trying to discuss how do you write fiction in terms of sexism or non-sexism, how do you write about what's real, what's true, what goes on out there in fiction. You as primarily a fiction writer, what would you say at this moment in time can tell us as fiction writers?
Trick question.
No pressure. How do you handle this fictionally? I mean, how do you talk about it?
Oh, I think you just always do what Flannery O'Connor said. You just show how some people would do. I mean, isn't that what fiction writers do? They're holding up some kind of mirror. It doesn't have to be a realistic one, but you're usually trying to show. So I don't know if you could write about this moment now until this moment had long passed. Are you saying, like, how do you write about, biased society?
Yeah, and how do you write about it when there is such heat and justified heat about what's going on? How do you write it as a fiction writer?
Well, this,
How do you talk about workshops?
in our workshop today, we talked about Barron's reading last night. And so I just shared that Barron and I had a conversation at breakfast the other day, and he used the word audacity. And he said that, if you're going to be a writer, you have to have some audacity. You have to sort of just write and maybe not care that much. If you're in the business of wanting to make friends, you're in the wrong business. Probably. I don't know. Yeah.
You read this to your daughter?
She's 25.
Could you read it to your mom?
Well, she's dead. Oh yeah, she would have been like, oh, that's not hard enough. That's not, I mean, she thought it was. No, I mean, she would have thought it was bullshit. The ending, bullshit. To be worried about how somebody else felt.
What about the first part, the Bloomingdale's part?
I mean, the part when I was a little kid, and what happened. Oh, I think eventually some point I did tell her, and then she told me, 7 stories like that from when she was growing up, in Worcester, Mass. in the 1930s, I mean, that's one of those things that men have been doing to little girls forever. Yeah.
Yep.
And this is partly in response to Michael's thing, and also your answer, which is, as a fiction writer, one of the things I found happening is, we often go back to a childhood incident in our work, and then we fictionalize it or whatever. And now I think what's happening is when I think about that, I now see it as, and thank you for the metaphor, the part of a pattern on the wallpaper, things that we thought were such specific incidents. And it means when you write a story, you may still be writing your own truth, but it might resonate more. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it has made, I think, a lot of us reevaluate experiences that we never spoke about or that we never told anyone about, but that are very much part of our existence. And that's kind of freeing, but it also means that maybe some little piece of fiction I write will have some kind of bigger echo.
Yeah. I think that's one thing about getting older and looking back and having a different perspective on some things that happen. And I was very aware, I did do a little research when I was very aware of all the stores that have closed and all the things that are different, yet all the things that are still the same, which was weird. And
the details that grounded it in a specific place and time gave it a richness that it contributes to the universality of it, because yes, it was in this specific time and place, but it happened on the bus in Boston, and it happened here, it happened there, and but the specific details really helped to flesh it out and to make it a very, very real thing for the reader.
Thanks.
Listener in this case.
Michael?
Just one other response to clarify my question earlier. To give you an example, I read and loved Lolita when I was 20 years old.
Yeah.
Jump forward 25 years and I had a 14-year-old daughter. And I read Lolita, and I read the old version with Edmund Wilson's quote on the front saying, "A beautiful, tender love story." And I would recall the father, the daughter, and the chill humber.
Yeah.
And there was no one, and I really had a hard job with classic literature.
Yeah.
So the book stayed the same.
Right.
But my appreciation and understanding of the reaction to the culture took another 25 years ago. And so we're going through the same kind of thing.
Yeah, well now you're bringing up, whether or not, we're going to look at certain works of art differently, or the creators of that art, all that stuff. I mean, look, we don't need to talk about stand-up comedy in here. We just have to deal with books, so, yeah.
Well, Rachel, one of the things that, as you're reading it, in the whole Me Too
Yeah.
phenomena is how men have not responded. You know, the fact that, I'm waiting for somebody to say, and I've had conversations with my friend, it's not that these things are wrong, but they're pathetic. And I want a man to stand up and say, you know, what Weinstein did is pathetic, what Trump did is pathetic, it's not just wrong. You know, where are the men writing this?
Look, the conversation that we've had has been very binary, and that's a big problem. It's much, we love it in America, we love black and white, we love right and wrong, we love the two-party system. It's much more complicated than that, you know? I mean, we're trying to,
The point is,
yeah.
if you look at it, it's not just wrong, it's,
Yeah.
Many men, myself included, like Michael said with Lolita, they said, this isn't wrong, it's just pathetic if somebody's doing that,
Well, it's great writing too, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
the same way, I'm a new father of, I'm sorry. I'm a new father of, I've only been a father of girls for the last 2.5 years, teenage girls, and I can't read Lolita. I bought it and I can't, I read the first few pages and I'm like, oh no, I can't go there. And that's terrible as a writer, because it's a beautiful, beautiful writing from what I understand, okay? I can't read it. But the other thing is...
But it's great, you live in a country where you don't have to.
No, great. Yeah. But the other thing is men are talking about it. Men are talking about this, okay? And, I don't have a friend who thinks that this is right, okay? But it's a political thing too. In this country, when one person loses power, someone else gains power. So men are afraid of losing their power. Same with black and white. Same with race.
Thanks, Lindsay. Yeah.
So I think as like females, I think we all can relate and have had like something similar, if not like multiple times happen to us like this. And I know that I've tried to write about like instances like this, but like I get like really upset and really angry. So I was just interested in hearing how you like went about writing this. So like you have like such restraint. Like I feel like the restraint and like the calmness like in your writing, and I was just wondering how like, did you get angry like writing this or?
No, I honestly, it was more that part of the point is that, this stuff was all like pressed down there, so I didn't really think about it that much. It's ubiquitous, it's everywhere, so it's all the time, so you don't really think about it. More than anything, I didn't really want to talk about it, I just wanted to show it. I didn't want to really write a polemic, I didn't want to analyze too much. I wanted to give an experience of just kind of sort of what it felt like. If anything, yeah, I probably got a little angry when I was writing it. I was sad. It made me sad more, honestly. Sad, and we can have this conversation later. It's a longer conversation about all the ways that you buy into this stuff, and that all the unconsciousness that one walks around with. That's all. Yeah, some.
I would say the connection between the three pieces that you have there, of you being, him exposing himself to you as a young girl, do you feel like that has a direct connection to the telephone number and the "you're beautiful"?
Yeah, I did. For me, it does. Yeah. It's all that kind of thing. Like I'm just walking around being myself, and now someone's slapping me in the face saying, "No, you're not you.
You're what I want you to be."
Yeah, and which I have there's nothing to be further from my mind, and it's so, it's so reductive. It's so shockingly reductive, and every time it happens, it does do something to you.
So you think if you didn't, I was trying to find that string between the stories of like how seeing the man flash you as a kid then makes you feel as though this is another flash with the number.
Yeah, sort of. It felt similar to me. Yeah. It's just
because there is no. I didn't get direct commentary from what you read, like how you felt about each thing. It did really just feel like I'm showing you. I'm showing you. I'm showing you.
Okay.
And for me as the reader
all right,
to come
that's
to
helpful.
my own,
that's actually helpful feedback
for me to come to my own conclusion about what is it that links it? What is she really feeling about it? At the end, you're kind of, you're directing it about this one incident, but those other things building up, I kind of have to come as a reader come to my own.
Thank you for that feedback. That's useful to me.
Well, I think at first I was going to just ask well, what do you mean?
Okay.
But I think there's a beauty in being able to look at these separate instances and then coming to my own conclusion
Okay.
about how they link together, but I don't know if that was necessarily your purpose of what you were trying to
I don't know if I thought
accomplish.
it out that much, but, okay. Yeah, you've already,
Well, just thinking of what Summer said, in the first two, there's a covering of light that happens. Because with the first one, you're led into the shadows. With the second one, the car comes and it blocks that light. And there's something going on that is struggle between light and dark that's happening that I thought was really magical just in the showing of it. So that was
thanks, thank you, thank you. Yeah, Mark?
You said this was a rough draft.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounded a lot more than a rough draft. How do you bring it from this rough space to, a finished piece?
Well, for one thing, I'm not happy with a lot of the language. I mean, as I tripped over a few, I'm not happy with, the language needs to be fixed up in there. But, and also, I thought a lot about there's places where it needs to get punched up a little more, and I maybe need to make a stronger point. I'm not sure if it feels balanced. I'm not sure that, and a lot of things. But definitely one would be the language. Language would be a big thing. I'd go through and look at my verbs, which is something I wanted to talk about tomorrow in our workshop. Yeah. I mean, I have a lot of to be and to have forms of the verb. Yeah.
I'm just curious structurally, because there's one story from your childhood and then two that sort
Yeah.
of both take place
Right.
very recently.
Right.
I'm curious about, did you think to yourself, oh, I should really find one that sort of occurred in a reasonable medium between those two, like somewhere in the middle of my life?
Honestly, when I first started outlining this, I had so many incidents, it would be a book. And then I'm like, I don't have time to do that now, and I don't particularly want to revisit some of these things. And so I just made a really abrupt decision to do this. So that's why one of the other things I'm not sure about. And I have to have some time to look at it and see whether that really feels balanced or anything. All right, everybody must want to get out of this room by now. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.